Hi writers, it's time for us to get started writing again. You have done such great work while I have been gone. I cannot wait to see what you do when I get back. But today I want to focus on the genre that we are writing. We have been writing narrative stories about our lives. Those were those small moment stories. But in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we have really been working hard on realistic fiction. Now remember that word genre sounds kind of funny, but it just means what type of book is it? And a lot of times we can divide books into 2 categories, fiction and nonfiction. Now I know I want you to think in your head right now, what do those 2 words mean? Fiction and nonfiction. I think there are some resources around the room that you can look at to check yourself. All right, good. Fiction is a story, right? A lot of kids think fiction and fake because they start with F and they like to use that word as alliteration when you choose the same consonant sounds over and over again to help you remember things or to make you feel a certain thing. Kids like to say fiction and fake, but that's not necessarily true because fiction books are narratives. They are stories. They have important parts like beginning, middle, and end. And the purpose of a fiction story is to entertain us. Sometimes it can teach us a lesson, but mostly it entertains us with characters, with settings, and a plot that usually has some kind of problem that needs to be solved. Oftentimes, characters have dialogue. They talk with each other. You can tell what they're feeling on the inside. All of those great things that we've been working on to bring your stories to life, those stories are what make your work fiction. So the fiction genre is a story. Nonfiction, on the other hand, a lot of kids think not fake or real. But that's not necessarily true. Nonfiction is factual. It tells true facts, and the purpose of nonfiction is to teach only. We don't need to entertain during nonfiction. We just want to tell facts. Now, some nonfiction books can be entertaining because we're excited and interested in the topic, or there are neat graphics and pictures that help us learn exciting facts. But generally, nonfiction is to teach only, and it focuses around facts. Now that we know the difference between fiction and nonfiction, I want you to zoom in on the fiction side. Stories with beginning, middle, and end that have characters, a setting, a plot. And we're focusing in not just writing fiction or narrative stories, but we are writing realistic fiction. Now, realistic fiction is a genre that is very tricky to a lot of kids because it seems real. And so they think, oh, that's nonfiction because fiction's fake and nonfiction's real. But remember, that's not the case. Realistic fiction just means that the story sounds so real that it might actually be true. It could be true. It seems like it could be true. So we're not talking about stories about fairies or transporting tree houses or talking animals. We're not talking about things like that. Those are more fantasy. Those are not real, and they don't really happen. We are talking about stories about characters like you and me that really could happen. A lot like my Jordan stories and a lot like the realistic fiction that you are writing about. But now that we know what realistic fiction is and we've been practicing it for a while, let's use what we've learned to help us figure out how to choose a good mentor text for us to help us grow as writers. So I've got some of our favorite stories here from our house that we have read as a class. Some of these are realistic fiction. Some of these are not. Think about each book. Let's talk about Teddy Spaghetti. Remember, Teddy's a little boy who loves spaghetti and who is nervous about school. When he went to a new school the first day, he made some friends, but he also met Brian the bully that called him Teddy Spaghetti. Now, by the end of the story, Teddy and Brian were able to get along. They shared spaghetti, and Teddy was even planning on bringing extra spaghetti for school the next day to share with all his new friends. Could that really happen? It's a story, right? There's a beginning. In the beginning, he was nervous about school. In the middle, he went to school. And at the end, he liked his new friends. We have characters. They talk to each other with dialogue. The setting was at Teddy's house and at school. This is fiction. But is it realistic fiction? Or is it more fantasy? Could this actually happen? Yes, it could have. This is an example of realistic fiction. A story that really could have happened. Okay, good job. Let's take a look at another one of my favorites, Violet the Pilot. Now, it is a story. In the beginning, Violet loved to invent things and didn't have very many friends. In the middle, she worked hard on a new invention so that she could enter a flying competition. But she wasn't able to compete in it because she rescued a Boy Scout troop. And at the end, she became a hero, where people admired her and accepted her for the inventor that she was. Now, can a kid really build and invent things? Sure you can. You guys do it all the time. Do kids often create multiple flying machines that actually work and they're allowed to fly around in them? No. No, that doesn't actually happen, does it? So while this is a fiction story, and there are parts of it that seem realistic, such as Violet being kind of a loner at school, people picking on her, Violet getting creative and not giving up, those things are realistic. But her actually creating these flying machines that save people's lives, it would be wonderful. But it's not realistic, is it? So this is just realistic. This is just a fiction story. We would not call this realistic. It is not realistic, even though parts of it seem to be. Good job. All right, let's look at Fireflies. This is a book that we've used as a mentor text before. Now, this is not an exactly true story, but it is a story. In the beginning, the little boy is eating dinner and he notices fireflies outside. In the middle, he and all of his friends go out into the field at dusk and they try to catch as many fireflies as possible. At the end, the little boy wanted to keep his fireflies but noticed that they were not happy in his jar. And so even though he was sad to let them go, he did, and he felt proud of himself for it. Could that really happen? It is a fiction story. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It has characters that talk. There's a setting. There's a problem that needs to be solved. But I don't think anything in here is not realistic. I mean, maybe he didn't actually catch thousands, but that was more of an exaggeration than saying something is true that wasn't. This is definitely an example of realistic fiction. Good job, boys and girls. Y'all are doing a great job of figuring out what is realistic fiction versus what is just a really good fiction story, right? Now it's time in your writing to think back to stories that have really captured your interest. What have writers done that have made you really love and buy into that story? Think about it for a moment. Maybe you have a book right now that feels so real to you. What exactly is it that makes it feel real? A lot of times in picture books, the pictures look really detailed. Always giving dialogue, having characters speak, will make a book seem more real. And telling that story bit by bit, just like we know how to in the itsy bitsy steps, is going to bring that story to life. Boys and girls, today as you write, I want you to get straight to work. But if you need to grab a book and look at an example of a real author's writing where they made something that was perhaps fiction seem very real, go ahead and get inspired by their work. Read a little bit while you're writing and see if you can add that sort of idea into your story as well. Again, I can't wait to hear what you have written and read what you have written when I get back. Keep up the good work, boys and girls. I'm really proud of you. Happy writing.